welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited for you to meet today's guest. I say that all the time, but it's true. Okay, Ben Boothe. He works for a school district in Kansas and is one of the assistant superintendents. Okay, social media was on his plate, but he really didn't have enough time. And he actually partnered with us here at Social School for EDU with our full management program, where we're actually posting on their pages and their staff is sending such fabulous content. It's amazing. You're going to want to check out their content, but he's going to just share where he was at with social media, kind of how it's evolved in his district, how it's doing now, and the phenomenal reach and everyday storytelling that's happening, and then some of the feedback that they're getting. So whether you are looking at potentially outsourcing or whether maybe you know a neighboring district that needs it, and you could definitely share this episode. But I think no matter what, you're going to pick up some great tips and some great stories that they've been able to share there in their district of 6,000 students. So I hope that you hit the subscribe button to this podcast. Gosh, this is episode 245 already. I can't believe it. I've been doing this thing since COVID. And it's a weekly thing. We get to hang out every week and share. And the best thing, sharing's caring, right? And share this podcast with others. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And just want to give a special shout out to all my listeners in Canada. Okay, it's been a little bit since I've been up in Calgary. I got to join their National Association case back in October. And wow, it was fun to learn so much about the storytelling efforts in their schools across all of Canada. But I met so many listeners that had found my podcast. So we are a worldwide podcast. There's schools from all over the world that listen in. But certainly just want to give a special shout out to my Canadian friends. Okay, now let's get to this week's K-12 PR tip. All right, today's K-12 PR tip being December 16th today, just talking a little bit about some of the holiday greetings and how you handle that on social media. I recently shared a blog, so you can go to the website, socialschoolforedu.com, and check out the blog section. But we were asking, people are like, well, do you put Merry Christmas? Do you put Happy Hanukkah? Do you put all of these other, holidays that are maybe more religious based on your school social media pages? And the universal answer is it depends. Okay. It depends on your community, the makeup of your community, and all of that. But I got some valuable insight from people that say yes, and and how they do that, people that say no, and what they may do instead. So I just want to invite you to take a look at that. Our blogs come out every other week. You will never miss a blog if you're signed up for our newsletter, which will be very helpful. But it's not just my advice, guys. I am connected to the best of the best across the country, and I always lean into them for help in handling and asking, what are some of the best practices? So just want to share that. If you do choose to celebrate, you're going to want to make sure to take in consideration what other holidays that you may be neglecting. And, we definitely want to represent your community and what that looks like. So take a look at that latest blog. And now let's get to this week's interview with Ben Boothe. Welcome to the podcast. Mr. Ben Boothe is in the house. How are you?
I'm super. How are you doing?
I'm good. By the time this airs, it's going to be full-fledged basketball season. You've kind of got an
Yes.
important role there with
Yes.
basketball. That's kind of how we
Yes.
maybe made a connection all those years ago in Kansas. But I would love to kind of introduce you to the audience here. If you could share your background and then your role as Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services there
Sure.
for Gardner-Edgerton.
Sure. So our school district is about 6,000 students. We're on the northeast side of Kansas. So we're not on the Missouri side. And yeah, 6,000 students. So when you and I met, I was actually the director of community relations, and so responsible for all that PR work and the connections with the community. But since then, last 2 years, I have served as the assistant superintendent of educational services, but they didn't backfill the PR position. So I've been able to I am thankful to thankfully hold on to a lot of those responsibilities. But by doing that, it's also really led us to the partnership that we've created. So, in my current role, I oversee general education, special education, um, and general, what you would traditionally think of when you think of school districts, in addition to the community relations, public relations work, social media, press releases, community contacts, media contacts. So I'm still responsible for those items as well.
Okay. And do you have anybody in your staff to help you? Do you have an assistant or?
Now, this is an appropriate place to laugh out loud, right? So, sarcastically. No, unfortunately, I don't. And I didn't. So there's only one person. I was the only person in the department previously. And now we really don't even have a department
Right.
because my time is split. However, I am very fortunate to have great administrative assistants who are willing to help me out, even though it's not necessarily part of their responsibilities or role or traditionally would be. But they're quick learners and they are eager and willing to help me out. So they really have made my job responsibility much easier. But technically, no, we do not have anybody assigned to or a position allotted for public relations or community relations.
Okay, so you're talking about admin assistants in like the superintendent office, is that
Yes.
right?
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
Okay. And how long were you in that director of community relations role before you got put into your current role?
Yeah. So this is my 11th year in the district, and
Okay.
the first five actually, I was the director of secondary education, and then for 4 years, previous to these last two, for 4 years, I was the director of community relations, and I really wanted to move into that because my background is teaching, but computers, technology, website design. And so I already had an interest in that. And I felt like my educational background would serve me well when telling those stories and knowing how schools operate. So I feel like I had, or I had like the best of both worlds in terms of the education background, but also at least a jump start on all the social media and tech side of things. And I've said that when I first started, I went to the NSPR conference in Washington, D.C., and I went to a new communicators workshop. And the room was split, in my mind, about 50-50 in terms of there were 50% of us that were new to the school PR world coming out of the classroom or as educators, a traditional education background. And there are about 50% that were coming from outside of education. So they might have worked at the news station or with radio or a newspaper. And just listening to the questions asked by both groups, if I was going to be deficient in one area, whether that's not having the education background or not having the PR background, I'm thankful that I was on the side that I was because I think it'd be much harder to learn the role if you didn't have a real strong working knowledge of education. Not that people from that background, and I know I've got peers that have done a great job. The questions they were asking were a lot different because they were asking questions about how schools operate and where I didn't have to work. That's was already operating back here for me. So,
Yeah.
but we've got, and I know examples too of folks who have come from that industry that are rocking it too. I just know that for me, I'm glad I had the background coming into it that I did.
Yeah, there's a
If I had to choose.
learning curve on both sides,
Yes.
certainly. And believe it or not, Ben, I had neither. I was neither a teacher nor a media
Yeah.
person. I
See?
had to learn it all. And maybe that's what makes me a good teacher now because I just had to, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn here. Let's try to break this down. Um,
Sure.
well, Gardner-Edgerton, 6,000 students, you guys actually recently teamed up with us here at Social School for EDU to help elevate your social media storytelling. And I think you've got a great story to share. But I want to start with where you were before this happened. Kind of what was a struggle with your social media for your district? I mean, maybe it's really obvious of what you just shared as far as being a Department of One and all your responsibilities, but can you just break that down of what the struggle was?
Yeah. So when I took over the community relations positions 6 years ago, so that going into that first 4 years, we really didn't have much of a social media presence. We had a district account. A handful of schools had their own Twitter accounts, but there was no consistency. There was no brand tying the brand together. And so one of the first things I did in that role was I established a Facebook page for every school. We established Twitter accounts for every school. We created consistent handles. We talked about what was appropriate to post, how often to post. We were doing all of the things that we know to do as social media experts. And that was going well, and we were telling our story, and we were outpacing bad stories with hundreds of good ones, and then COVID happened, right? And we had very little good content. And then coming out of COVID, I was getting pulled more and more towards this assistant superintendent role, and so not only was I wasn't naive. I was noticing that our schools were not posting consistently. They weren't posting a lot. Really, when they were posting, it was to Facebook. And so it was not uncommon to go to a school's page and see that it hadn't been updated in months. So I'd already started down and the guilt was starting to set in, especially last year, because I was lucky to post once a week. I mean, I really was doing well to post once a week. And although I appreciate social media for the tool it is, resource it is, personally, I'm not a big fan of it. And even to the sense that I took it off my phone because it just mindless scroll, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to remind myself to go check it. Like that's where, so for me, it's healthy. But for the school district, that's not good. And so I was guilty. I'm like, I know I need to be doing this more often. And so also recognizing again, schools weren't being consistent about it. So basically about the same time that we decided to partner, I'd already made the decision that I'm basically condensing. I'm getting rid of if schools want to keep their accounts, they can, but no surprise, they really didn't want them. They said, we're not using Twitter except the high school for their Twitter account and scores and quick hitters and that kind of stuff. So with the exception of the high school and Twitter, really everybody was good with me collapsing all of our pages, getting rid of the Twitter accounts altogether with the exception of the district account in the high school. And then kind of moving towards a one Facebook page. Instagram, I was only touching because they were connected to that.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, Andrea, I was using our website software allows us to post, like when we post a news story. So from an efficiency standpoint, great, post a news story and I can tag Facebook and Twitter, but it's not native. It's not being posted natively. And so we weren't getting the traction on Facebook and social media and Twitter like we should have been. And I was like, this is not going to get any better. It's probably just going to get worse. And so, and I'd already asked you about your services about 4 years ago, and you shot me down. It was like asking for a date or something. I got shot down real quick because you said you weren't going to do it. But so I think you reached out to me because business was expanding, and the timing I don't think could have been better in terms of when you asked because of where we were at in our situation. So the timing just worked out, I think, good for both of us.
Yeah.
So that's why we came to you.
Yeah, traditionally, we do full social media management for a lot of school districts that don't have somebody in your role, right?
Mhm.
But your role is very unique because, like you said, the community relations part is such a slim part. You
Yes.
don't have anybody else really. So it is pretty unique. And we do serve about 10 schools that have somebody like you. But in some cases, with branding and with the control factor, right? Because you have to have a lot of trust in us. We're getting content from your staff members. It's coming straight to us. It doesn't get routed through you
Yep.
first. It
Yep.
comes straight to us, and our account manager then ends up posting that. And so the relationship has certainly worked wonders. Obviously, and we'll share some of those results. But that was kind of the fear, I think, a few years ago was just like, gosh, we've tried this with a few folks, and sometimes it doesn't work so well because there's
Yeah.
that control factor. So
Yeah.
we made sure to set up those parameters. And I mean, I guess, can you just kind of decide or, explain why you chose to then, partner with us and what the onboarding process was like?
Yeah. Well, I think we recognized when that even back 4 or 5 years ago, I could see the value in what you were doing. And your approach and your company's approach just aligns with the way we wanted to operate, and that is telling the stories, right? Like that's just best practice, telling stories. People want the human side of what's going on in the school district. And the other thing I would tell as I'm advocating for this, and if it's said for a long time, or when people have criticized the district, I would share, you don't realize, none of us realize how many accomplishments that are occurring on a daily basis in every building. And it's just, we did not have the capacity to tell those stories. And just again, that guilt would set in. And so this is really opened by the staff being able to send information to you all directly. It takes this filter or funnel out that was just hampering, uh, hindering progress. And so, yeah, so that's why. And then our staff that was my biggest concern when we onboarded, when we're getting ready to onboard, was I was nervous our staff were going to provide you enough content, because I've asked for content every year. I ask for it, like at the beginning of the year, like, hey, here's the process for submitting stuff. We want to know what's going on. And I get very little in terms of feedback. And now, I see it on our Facebook page. I hear from you all that, our staff is doing a phenomenal job of sending in content. And I feel like now that they're seeing it and are believers, it's just going to amplify what we're able to provide. So from that, I don't remember what the first part of the question was, but I'll just share that in general.
Yes.
And then, but the onboarding process was super smooth as well. It was, in my mind, it was very straightforward in that you asked for some details in terms of our branding, right? Color schemes, logos, and you minimize. I like that too, is keeping it simple in a sense. And then, a very simple task, but I think has really facilitated a lot of this, is getting you an email address that's hosted by our district. And so that's just made it a lot easier, I think, because when people populate, it's easy to go to get it to you. And then, by you customizing the video at the beginning of the year, we know that professional development time at the beginning of the year is extremely limited. And so, you put together a short 9-10 minute video so we could fit it in, every building could see it and know what the process was. And then, but I think the most important part of that video, and I told principals to stop the video, was when you asked everybody to basically pull out their phones and type in social media and send off an email, just a text email, so that it was automatically populating for them. And the principals paused the video, kind of passively aggressively said, let's go ahead and do this right now. We're not just going to go skip by this in the video. And I think that helped too.
Yeah.
So the video part, and then Melissa and Stephanie have been great. There's been a few places or a few posts, you talked about being on the same page and parameters. There's been a few posts that Melissa's had questions about, and she and I've got a good working relationship that she'll run those by me. She knows what our triggers are in the school district. And so we don't step in it, basically.
Right. Yeah, Melissa's a great storyteller. She doesn't live in Kansas. All of our relationships are just remote, so she's working from home. But she was also an educator.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So
Well, one other thing about Melissa, she does a great job with, and I know all of your team does, is, and you know this, when people send us stuff, they're not big on writing the narrative. They just want to send it off and say, this was Tuesday with a picture. And so that's what takes time. That's the struggle with it. And people, and so I think our staff have realized they don't have to put in a ton of details. Just give us the bullet point, and Melissa takes it from there and does a good job of building on it, even if sometimes it has to be a little more vague or generic than it might have been. But that doesn't matter. People are looking at it, they're looking at the kids, and it really doesn't have a great impact on it. So that's been helpful too.
Yeah, and you're just going to get your report card, I guess. We started in August. I mean, in August, your Facebook page, it had been reaching about 5,000 people a month, and then it jumped up to 47,000 a month, and then 80,000 people you reached on Facebook in just 1 month in September, because of that everyday storytelling. And you've grown by a couple hundred fans. Besides some of those numbers, what do you think the impact has been? What kind of feedback are you getting from your, school community? Maybe parents? I don't know. Share with me on that.
Well, so before you go there, or before I go there, the other key component of this is, even though I've done research and studied social media and best practices, I still wasn't an expert when it came to timing of posts, or I'd be so rushed that it's like, I don't care when this, I just have to get this out. And that's something I know Melissa is very in tune with, and is very intentional about when she posts content. And that, I know, drives a lot of those numbers that you just referenced. So we're very thankful. I knew that wasn't happening here before that. So, and then in terms of what we've heard, we definitely have parents, students, community members more engaged on our social media platforms, because other than when I screwed up and put some announcement out, the 98% of posts that are storytelling, we're getting engagement in terms of people making comments. Or the Thursday, I know you guys, it's kind of old school now, but the throwback Thursdays, they're still popular. And it's interesting. I kind of like looking at those posts most, not because of the post itself, but because of what people will put in there, like, oh, I remember that person, or wasn't her mom the bus driver here or there? And that's pretty cool. And these are old pictures. I mean, these are like from the 50s and 60s, and we get people commenting on them with some connection to them. So that's been cool. And then in general, the feedback's been positive. Our superintendent, who is on social media a lot, has commented to me several times, like, man, that social media company we're using, they're really rocking. I'm like, I told you it was going to be a lot better than it was. And so, and I've just, people sporadically will tell me that, employees in the district, they'll say, boy, social media is really picked up. And so, and I'm good. I don't take credit for that.
Well, you're part of it, and you definitely helped.
No, it's the staff that's doing. I mean, it's Melissa and
Yes,
staff. I mean, again, it's not possible without the content, right? And
right.
I'm just been so not surprised, because my staff does. I'm not surprised when they do great things, because that's what they do all the time. But I mean, it has surprised me the amount of content they're on board. So
Yeah. And they're sending in good stories, great pictures. I mean, everybody's got a phone in their hand.
yep,
Some pictures are going to be better than others.
yep,
But you're right. I mean, it really does take the buy-in. And we've launched this summer, we launched with about 9 schools in the last, 5-6 months. And it's been amazing. Yours is one of the best, but a lot of these schools, I mean, people just understand that it is important. And so it's great. Teachers and other staff members are under a lot of pressure. But taking the 30 seconds to take a photo and just give a little description, and then kind of let our team take it from there, it can make a big difference. And I don't know if you're aware of the current stats. I mean, 70% of adults are on Facebook in the US, and the
yep.
average time that an internet user, not even a social media user, but an internet user is on social media in a day is 2.5 hours. So if they're spending 2.5 hours and they don't even have an opportunity at all to see what's happening in your schools, they're
Yes.
seeing other stuff, right? And so you described an amount of guilt that you had a little bit before because you knew that it was important, but you just didn't have the capacity. So what has it done for that for you? Like
Yeah.
how have you been feeling?
Yeah. Well, one other thought I had, and I'll answer that question that I
Yep.
didn't lose, was you talked about the pictures that they may be a little grainy or whatever. And this is going to sound like a humble brag, but it's not. Perfectionism. Like I felt like I needed to take the right picture, come back and sit down in front of my computer and put this beautiful narrative together. Well, then work, and then everything else happens, and it never got done. Where when you give away a little bit of that control or perfectionism, it nobody cares that that picture's blurry. And like you said, they're gonna look at it and now they've got it, but then they're gonna keep scrolling. So it's not as mission critical that it be perfect. And I think that was slowing down our workflow too in the past. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I
Yeah.
don't answer the question.
Um, just what has it done for you how you feel? Because
Yeah,
you
the
used
guilt.
to feel some
Yeah,
guilt.
yeah.
So
I was thinking about that. I was thinking not about this conversation, but I think it was on the way in today or yesterday about how I really don't even have to think about social media anymore. It's just basically been taken off my plate. And even Twitter. And I remember why I was going to say that was um, our I had to come to grips too. I wanted when we started out, doing everything social media wise, and when in reality, 75% of our um, clientele is going through Facebook or whatever percentage it is at this. People are not looking at Twitter, at least our clientele, and so why are we spending time on Twitter? And so it was that acknowledgement, like let's just focus on one thing and be really good versus that whole idea of spreading ourselves too thin. And so in terms of the guild, it's just I don't have to think about it. And I hear and another reason I have to think about it is because I hear those comments from folks that they're crushing it. Social media is crushing it, and the company's crushing it. And um, I'm just like, great. There's one less thing that I need to worry about.
yeah, you can focus on all of the other things that consume your time and
Yep.
hopefully all of the positive stories obviously are helping when those moments of not so great things happening in the
Yep.
school um
Yep.
are
And
happening.
that's back to what happened during COVID was we didn't have very many good stories to sell. And so all of this work we'd done to drown, basically when that blip on the radar comes up, it just moves past where when that blip came up at that point, it's stuck there for a while. And now we're just flooding the, Facebook with great stories. And so if something negative pop up, it goes away pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just scrolling on your page. I mean, you just announced some teachers of the year
Yep.
here in October, and one of them has 87 comments. I mean,
Yep.
that's unbelievable engagement. Are there any other favorite stories that you've seen that have kind of been on your pages since we started
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you would like to share?
Yeah. So we have a very strong special education advocacy population, and they are great about sending in content and promoting and diversity and inclusion in special education populations. And so, one I was looking back a little bit to, we had an activity where our general ed peers in high school met with their special ed peers who are um, more severely disabled, and they were working on Taylor Swift bracelets. The trend that came through, so they were making Taylor Swift bracelets together. We also started a Hall of Fame this year for alumni. And so, we were able to tell that story from basically the nomination process through the who was elected or brought in, and then the whole weekend where we celebrated them at the football game and a luncheon, and so that was a fun story to tell over multiple posts. And then the timing of this partnership has been good too, because we have just starting last spring and really heavily this fall been going through a bond development process, because we're actually going to have the vote next April. But we've been able to keep the public informed via social media and via these stories every time we've met or there's been a focus group. So that's been really helpful too, because, and like the numbers you mentioned, like I'm guessing that more people have seen that than they would have 6 months ago, even though I would have posted it in the same places.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So if somebody's listening and thinks, gosh, this might be just what my school needs, like, oh gosh, but what would you tell them?
Oh, it's a no brainer in my mind. Um, the everything has just been made so much easier for us. The onboarding was easy and a very light lift, and then the process for getting the staff trained was easy, efficient. And then after we kind of got a rhythm of how the stuff would be posted or submitted, we really haven't had to do a whole lot. So I would strongly encourage, there's a lot of districts in Kansas where at the central office, it's only a superintendent and a secretary and maybe a special education person. And if I was a superintendent in that district, I mean, for sure, it would be a tool I'd be considering for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And we only have so much capacity. So after your little promotion, Ben, we might be full anyways.
Yes.
But
Yes. Well, that's what
we,
you told me 4 years or 6 years ago, I think, 45 years ago. And you're so you got to keep
yes,
up.
here we are. Yes, we love what we do and we do have the best team.
Yes.
What would you say is your best social media tip? Do you have a favorite social media tip?
Hmm. I'm all about, just in general, I'm all about efficiencies. Like, how can I make systems or processes where we're efficient? And I know that I learned early on to leverage content. So, if maybe early on I would have just posted to Facebook, and then I would have been like, well, I really need to send that out via email too, or I need to get it, maybe it's even still physically out in a window shop or something like that. So whenever I sit down anymore, I always design with the idea of I need to get as much out of this as possible. And so maybe that's not a social media tip, but just designing with that idea in mind, like I'm going to try to get as much out of, to be efficient with my time, I'm going to try to get as much impact or outreach as possible with a piece of content.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great tip. And we've got school communicators and everybody's got more than just social media on their plate as well. So
Yeah.
that's a great tip.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Ben, for hanging out.
Yeah.
If people have follow-up questions or want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Probably email,
Okay.
more social media, Facebook, but probably email, because I even get my voicemails, through my email, like a lot of us do. So I pick it up that way too. So
Okay. Well, we'll make sure to include your email address in the show notes,
yep,
okay? Along with the links to your channel so they can
yep,
take a look. Just please pass on, to your staff. They are doing an amazing job. And obviously we love partnering with schools that are eager to celebrate. The worst thing that can happen is when we team up with a school and we don't get the content, which is what you were afraid of.
that was my again. I shouldn't have been because I know the staff and how great they are, but I was still nervous.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you don't have to be nervous anymore. We're several
Sure,
months in and it's still flowing good. So thank you so much for joining us today.
sure.
And everybody, thanks for listening in. You got to learn a little bit, and I'm sure you still picked up some tips, even if you're not interested in, offloading your social media efforts. But we'll be back again next week with another great guest. Ben, thanks for hanging out with us
You're
today.
welcome. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. See you
Bye.
next time. Bye bye.